I never believed in ghosts. I never believed in haunted houses, strange noises, or stories about people seeing things that weren't there. I always thought those stories were made up. Then I moved into a new house. It wasn't an old, creepy house from a horror movie. It was actually pretty normal. It had 2 floors, 3 bedrooms, a small backyard, and a long hallway connecting the living room to the kitchen. I bought it because it was cheap and close to my work. During the first week, everything seemed completely normal. I unpacked my boxes, bought some furniture, and slowly started making the place feel like home. Nothing strange happened, at least not until the 7th night. It was around 2 in the morning. I was sitting in my bedroom watching videos on my phone when I heard something downstairs. It sounded like something had fallen. I paused the video and listened. Nothing. A few seconds later, I heard it again. This time, it sounded different. It sounded like footsteps, slow footsteps. I sat completely still. The footsteps moved across the floor downstairs, then they stopped. I waited for almost a minute before getting out of bed. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The house was completely dark. I slowly walked downstairs. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. Nothing had fallen. I checked every room. Nobody was there. I actually laughed at myself. I was tired, and I figured the house was just making strange noises. I started walking back upstairs. That's when I noticed something. There was a white door at the end of the hallway. I stopped immediately. I stared at it for several seconds. Something felt wrong. I knew that door hadn't been there before. I had lived in the house for 7 days. I had walked through that hallway hundreds of times. There had always been a blank wall at the end. In fact, I remembered putting a painting on that wall when I first moved in. Now the painting was gone, and in its place was a door. I slowly walked toward it. The closer I got, the colder the hallway felt. I reached for the handle. It was freezing. I turned it. The door didn't open. I tried again. Nothing. Then I heard 3 quiet knocks. Knock, knock, knock. They came from the other side. I froze. Someone was standing behind the door, and I was completely alone in the house. I stepped backward. The knocking stopped. For several seconds, there was complete silence. Then the handle started moving slowly. Someone on the other side was trying to open the door. I ran upstairs and locked myself in my bedroom. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went downstairs expecting the door to still be there. It wasn't. The hallway was completely normal. The painting was back on the wall. I stood there for a long time. I even touched the painting. Everything looked normal. I started thinking maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe I had been half asleep. Maybe stress was getting to me, so I decided not to tell anyone. For the next 3 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th night, I heard the knocking again, 3 knocks, exactly the same. I walked downstairs. The white door was back. This time, I didn't touch it. I just stood there staring at it. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a small piece of paper underneath the door. I slowly picked it up. There was only one sentence written on it. "Don't open the door." I immediately dropped the paper. I wanted to leave the house, but it was almost 3 in the morning. I decided to call my friend Mike. Mike had helped me move into the house. He knew the hallway. He knew there had been a painting there. When he answered, I told him what had happened. At first, he laughed. Then I sent him a picture of the door. He stopped laughing. There was a long silence. Finally, he asked me something strange. "Are you sure that's your house?" I told him of course it was. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. He had seen that door before, not in my house, somewhere else. Mike told me that his grandmother used to live in the same neighborhood. When he was a kid, she had told him a strange story. She said some houses had rooms that weren't supposed to exist. According to her, those rooms appeared only when someone in the house was supposed to find them. I asked him what happened if someone opened the door. He didn't answer. Instead, he told me he was coming over. 20 minutes later, Mike arrived. We stood in the hallway together. The white door was still there. Mike stared at it. Then he whispered something. I remember this. He reached toward the handle. I grabbed his arm. "Didn't your grandmother tell you not to open it?" Mike looked at me. "She told me never to open one alone." Then he turned the handle. The door opened. Behind it was a narrow staircase leading downward. I pointed my phone flashlight into the darkness. The stairs seemed to go much deeper than the house should have allowed. Mike started walking down. I followed. At the bottom, we found a long hallway. There were doors on both sides, dozens of them. Every door looked exactly the same. White, old, silent. Mike walked toward the nearest one. Before he could touch it, I noticed something on the wall. There were photographs, hundreds of photographs. They showed people standing outside different houses, families, couples, children, and then I saw something familiar, my house. There was a photograph of my house hanging on the wall, but it looked much older. I moved closer. There was a date written underneath it. The date was from 20 years ago. Then I noticed someone standing in front of the house. A man. He was staring directly at the camera. I felt my heart stop. because the man looked exactly like me, same face, same eyes, same hair, even the same small scar above my eyebrow. I looked at Mike. He was staring at the photograph too. Neither of us said anything. Then we heard footsteps behind us. We turned around. The hallway was empty. Mike grabbed my arm. We need to leave. We ran toward the stairs, but before we reached them, one of the doors opened, slowly. Inside was a bedroom, my bedroom, the exact same room. My bed was there, my desk was there, my computer was there, even the clothes I had left on the floor were there, but there was one difference. Someone was sitting on my bed. I couldn't see their face. Mike pulled me away. We ran upstairs and slammed the white door shut. When we looked back, the door was gone. The painting was back. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Mike looked at me. We're leaving. I agreed. We went outside and stood in the street. Mike told me he didn't know what that place was, but he knew one thing: his grandmother had been terrified of it. Before he left, he told me to stay somewhere else for the night. I did. I stayed at a hotel. The next morning, I returned to the house. Everything looked normal. The painting was still on the wall. The white door was gone. I started packing my things. I decided I was moving out. Then I noticed something on my desk. There was a photograph. I had never seen it before. It showed my house. The picture looked like it had been taken from across the street. I turned it over. There was a message written on the back. You were warned. I immediately called Mike. He didn't answer. I called again, nothing. I drove to his house. When I arrived, another person answered the door. I asked for Mike. The man looked confused. He told me nobody named Mike lived there. I thought he was joking. Then he told me his family had lived in that house for almost 10 years. I drove away completely confused. I checked my phone. Every conversation I had ever had with Mike was gone. His number was gone. His pictures were gone. Even the photos of us together had disappeared. It was like he had never existed. I went back to my house. I didn't sleep that night. Around 3 in the morning, I heard 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I slowly walked downstairs. The white door was back, but this time something was different. There was writing on it, my name. Underneath my name was a date, tomorrow's date. I stood there staring at it. Then the door opened by itself. I could see the staircase. But this time there were no lights, no photographs, no doors, just darkness. Then I heard a voice. It sounded exactly like mine. It whispered one sentence. You finally came back. I ran out of the house. I didn't take anything with me. I didn't even lock the door. I drove to a hotel and stayed there for several days. Eventually, I found another apartment in a different city. I thought I was finally safe. For almost a year, nothing happened. I stopped thinking about the house. I stopped thinking about Mike. I convinced myself that the entire experience had been some kind of nightmare. Then last night, my phone received a message from an unknown number. There was no text, just one photograph. I opened it. My hand started shaking. The photograph showed my new apartment. It had been taken from outside my bedroom window. I looked toward the window. Nobody was there. Then I turned the photograph over. There were 3 words written on the back. You moved again. I haven't slept since. And this morning, when I walked into my hallway, I noticed something that wasn't there yesterday. A white door at the end of the hallway, and from the other side, I heard 3 quiet knocks, knock, knock, knock.